Welcome, welcome. We have myself, Megan, and Janine from admissions, and Matt Cumbee, who's our guest speaker this evening.
Hi, everyone. Seeing lots of familiar names in the participant list. Excited to see everyone on this evening. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Megan Marinos, the head of school at ICL Academy, and we have Janine Bissick, our head of admissions, and our special guest this evening is Matt Cumbee. As you can tell when you're reading over his bio in the webinar description, you can see that he is a little different than who we typically spotlight in these webinar series, but as a school that focuses on character, service, and leadership, we felt that it was very important and very relevant to spotlight one of our nation's best with one of our former Navy SEALs. So Matt is going to speak a little bit about his experience, also how he got to this career path that he had chosen, and also how his passion has driven him to us at ICL and everything in between. So without further ado, I would love to welcome our guest speaker this evening, Matt Cumbee. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Megan. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. I appreciate your time and the chance to speak with you all. I'll give a little bit of backstory on who I am and kind of how I got to be standing here tonight. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. I was a pretty average kid, was active all the time, played a lot of sports, was not a stellar at anything, but it was kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. I spent a lot of time running track and cross country. Admittedly, a lot of that time was spent running around the woods and just kind of goofing off, but it was a good place to grow up and a good place to live, and definitely enjoyed my upbringing. You know, some of those lessons I learned growing up early on, I think have contributed to what helped me be successful in the Navy. So we'll get into a little bit later on kind of how events in your all's lives are going to tangibly impact your future, and if I can help contribute or encourage you to make decisions that you'll see come to fruition several years down the road, you know, I'd consider that a win for tonight. So again, a little bit of backstory, right? Grew up in Nashville. I grew up a lot of times just running around outside, my buddies, canoeing, biking, things like that. Always had kind of an inclination towards wanting to go towards the military. I didn't really know why. Grandfathers were in the military, but that's pretty common. I just felt like I had a different path to take. A lot of guys, you know, girls I know, go into business, go into medicine, things like that. And while I admire those avenues, I can appreciate them, it just didn't feel like it was right for me. So I was kind of late to the application game for college. I guess I'd kind of still struggled with maybe the idea of joining the military right out of the gate. In hindsight, I'm glad I did not, because I think there's some, it's good for some, not great for all. And but after my first semester in college, as y'all will quickly find out, it can be pretty eye-opening. It's an experience, to say the least, for some. You're kind of out from underneath the wing of your household, and there's a lot of autonomy that you'll be exposed to. And you know, I always encourage people to enjoy those experiences and to learn new things, but to also kind of understand the values that you grew up with and to hold on to them. You know, parents love us more than anyone, and sometimes I think we push against them and rebel, but ultimately they are doing what's in our best interest. And you know, like anything, just absorb all the experiences you have and go forward. And so that being said, in first semester in college, it was enjoyable, I suppose. Still felt a little out of place. I went to the University of Tennessee. I should back up. Yeah, Tennessee in Knoxville. And after my first semester, came back and I walked into the Army recruiter office. And fortunately, I suppose they were on a lunch break. So I walked next door to the Navy office. And at the time they were pushing special operations. This was in 2009. So 2009 was kind of the height of the war, Iraq and Afghanistan. And so they were looking for people to enlist. And they put in front of me a super cool brochure of Navy SEALs coming out of the water wearing all black, and then told me that it was basically not possible, right? 90% attrition rate, 90% failure. And for whatever reason, that finally was kind of that push I think I needed to have a focus and a drive. And I feel like I found my purpose. So I went back to school and talked to my parents about it, which for the parents listening it can be pretty unnerving, I think, as a parent now. It's I can understand why they had some hesitation, but I think if your kids come to you with something, I would encourage you to just feed the ambition. Right? We don't want to be falsely feeding ambition, but if you want to take these steps and you want to pursue something kind of beyond what's normal, okay, let's take tangible steps and move in that direction. So that fortunately my parents did that. Went back to school, spent the next 3.5 years, I guess, basically training for the Navy. Right between classes, I'd be going to the pool, swimming classes, running classes, gym, and that was my life. I probably didn't have the typical college experience, but I enjoyed it, and I think it's helped solidify kind of who I am now. I've enjoyed the process, which we'll get into as one of the topics here. The process is the purpose, and I didn't know what I was kind of stumbling into at the time, but it paid for itself when I decided to actually join the Navy. So 4 years go by. 2013, I met my wife while we were in college together at Tennessee. Right after we graduated, got married. Also, for the parents listening, 22 seems very young to me now. I can't believe it. At the same time, I wouldn't change my decision. My wife is wonderful. She's far better than I am, but she is 22 is young. So there's a lot of life to live. But we got married, and then I left and joined the Navy. And so I was a newlywed, 2 months in to being married, and I was gone for like 6 months right off the bat. And that was a pretty trying time for my wife and I. And speaking of the military, I loved it, right? I selfishly, I got to do the jumping out of airplanes, diving, shooting, all the fun stuff that you see on TV. Meanwhile, my wife at home is the one, kind of holding down the fort. And so, if you ever see a veteran, thank their families, because they're the ones putting in the work, not us. So, anyways, joined the Navy, right? Leave for Chicago, Illinois boot camp. It's a process. If any of you guys have any ambitions about joining the military, understand that it is not going to be fun, and that's okay. You will take steps towards things that are not going to be what you thought they were. That doesn't mean that the payoff does not come through in the end, but it is. You got to stick through it. So have your goals, have your ambitions, and be totally receptive to the valleys and between the mountaintops. So after that, right, go to Coronado, San Diego, California, for BUDS, which is basic underwater demolition SEAL training. It's a historical term for when the SEAL teams were underwater demolition teams, and it's what you see on TV. It's they're running around with boats on your heads and carrying around logs, being wet, sandy, and tired all the time. It is, looking back, it is one of the most fun things I had ever done. I would not change it. At the time, obviously going through it, like, man, what am I doing? This is crazy. And people quit. And I know that those of you in the audience are pretty exceptional at the things you pursue. And I, by all means, encourage to continue those pursuits and those ambitions. I say this not to be discouraging, but interestingly, a lot of the people who pursue SEAL training, you look around the room at some of the guys, and you see guys who were, D1 water polo players, college football, professional fighters, a couple guys who are in the NFL. And you're like, man, these are the guys who are going to make it through. And some of them do, and some of them don't. And so I think one thing I took away early on in my career in the Navy was there's value in not being successful all the time. And I think some of these guys, they had such a track record of being winners their whole lives that when they stepped into this new arena, it was totally, the win or the lose was totally taken out of their hands, I guess I would say. They had the ability to perform, right, the same way I did or anybody else did, but it came under the different conditions, right? Different sort of preparation conditions, different sort of rest conditions. It's not a sport. You can kind of prepare for it that way, and you need to, right, to maintain your health and your readiness for it. But I guess when some of these opportunities are they'll knock you down, and I think the better idea is knowing how you'll respond to getting knocked down versus kind of always winning, because it's coming for you one way or the other. So went to Buds and enjoyed the process. It was a lot of fun. That's about a 6-month program of Buds, and that's first phase, which is all the running around, and second phase, which is the diving, heavy phase, and a lot of underwater evolutions. And I will say that all of the things you see on TV or you read about in the news, they are all 100% doable. I gave you a little bit of the backstory about my general averageness as a kid, because I was not some super talented athlete. I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the fastest swimmer. I just kind of was eager to be active and be outside, enjoy the little things. And so that's one thing to take away when some things are feeling a little overwhelming. It's not a bad idea to take a step back and just realize how the world will keep turning. When my wife at the time, we had just moved out to San Diego, we're about to start training, and one thing for SEAL training, the water is very cold. If you've ever been to the Pacific, it is, well, I guess some of you probably live in California, but it's cold all the time. And that's a big part of the training, is they just sort of torture you and just keep you in there, and they're monitoring the temperature and hypothermia and all that, but it's cold. But I remember saying to my wife, looking down the beach one day, and there's like 4-year-olds playing in the water, and it just gave some perspective of, we are so focused on this environment of selection and trying to pursue a goal that we kind of get wrapped around the axle on what it is that's actually happening. Because just down the beach, a couple 100 yards, is a family with their kids doing the same thing I'm doing. I just kind of have a more overwhelmed sensation about it. So from time to time, it was always good to kind of step out of yourself, look at what's going on, realize that the world's still turning. People still go to work. They still go get groceries, and they still have to take care of their kids. And just because you're pretty miserable in the moment, and you genuinely probably are, it doesn't mean that you won't come back out of it. So, if you find yourselves in these pits, take a second, right? There's some tools we can talk about to kind of create some momentum to pull yourself out, but understand that, your body and your mind kind of want to pull itself out of it. So let it. So, right, second phase is a lot of underwater stuff. Quick little anecdote about my time in second phase. I've been pretty fortunate up to this point to be successful. It doesn't mean it was by any means it was easy. I think having a background in running and being active throughout college, training for it, I just had physically prepared enough to not be injured, which is largely luck that I didn't step in a hole and roll my ankle. But it was a different approach at second phase. At first phase, it's really just how tough can you be? How well can you perform? How well can you show up and do what's being asked of you? In second phase, you're kind of expected to do some more technical skill sets. in this one case in particular, right, underwater, I hadn't trained enough for it. And so you get 4 opportunities to complete these evolutions. And I joked at the time I had more dives than anybody else going through the class because I was the third attempt for every single dive. That's not a good thing. Most guys get it through on 1 or 2, and I couldn't do this. I couldn't stick to it. And it's because I had a different approach. I had the approach of just grinding through, doing what was asked of me, and just try really hard, put the effort into it. But it was a different season and it was a different approach. And what was required for me was to step back, look at the technical requirements of the task in front of me, and then train according to those steps to be successful. So that was some good insight that I learned. I was fortunate enough to get all of my efforts completed on the 3rd try. So I was able to move on through training, but it was just a good lesson point for me. And then right, 3rd phase is all the shooting and demolition, all that good stuff. Definitely has a lot of, fearful moments throughout the whole process. One moment where we have to do, some open water swims, and part of the training is out in San Clemente Island in California. And from my understanding, that's a great white shark breeding ground. And we're doing these open water swims. And I just remember refusing at one point to look into the water because, I'm just envisioning Shark Week and just these sharks breaching out of the water and just me being in the jaws. I'm like, I'll just keep looking at the rocks instead. And so you just got to keep going, right? If I wanted to become successful in the program, there was one option, and that was to get in the water and keep going. But that doesn't mean that we do not have the same anxieties of that any of us would have. After that, went through the rest of the program, checked into SEAL Team 7 in 2015, and that was even harder, right? You think you've made it to the mountaintop at this point, right? You have your trident, the pin that you receive, and it was genuinely only the beginning, which is good to remember, right? That the process, it never ends, and that's okay. Like I said, the value is the process. Set goalposts along the way, set ambitions and pursue them, but understand that the feeling of success is very temporary. And really all you're doing is stacking those experiences, those failures, those successes all up in order to apply them to the next chapter that you pursue. So enjoyed my time at SEAL Team 7. A lot of fun, right? All the diving, all the jumping, all the camaraderie, all the antics. But I was gone a lot, a lot. At one year, they told me I can't go anymore. I can't travel anymore because I'd exceeded the required amount of days, or the maximum amount of days that service members can be, I guess, sent away from home. And right, it had just my wife and I at the time, but I just gone a lot. And so again, kind of going back to the whole idea of who to thank for veteran service, not me. I was doing all the fun stuff, but my wife was not. So deployed to Iraq in 2017. My wife was pregnant at the time with our first daughter, and she went into preterm labor at the time, and that was pretty scary. I had to kind of rush home, but was able to make it back for the birth. And my daughter's very healthy now. She's 5 years old, so that was a whirlwind of an experience as well. But just a lot of highs and lows with this whole thing. But all in all, yeah, my experience in the SEAL teams was super enjoyable, very challenging, but I wouldn't change any of it. A lot of new alternative ways of viewing the world. All right, growing up in Middle Tennessee is a way of doing things, and then you meet people from New York and Washington State and Florida and Texas, and they're all coming together and they're all in this single unit. And it was wonderful to hear how different people perceive the world and their experiences, and how all of those things kind of stack up together to make a very cohesive unit. So, a lot of good lessons from my time in the Navy. My wife and I chose to get out. I just recently got out for about 9 years, largely just because we have 3 kids now. So we have 3 under 5, 2, and a 1-year-old, and it's tough on families. So decided to go that route. I'm still pursuing the Navy Reserve, so I'll get the chance to maybe do some more skydiving and diving and shooting and all that good stuff. But yeah, I guess going forward, we can, if y'all have any questions, we can go that way.
Yeah, and while our questions come in, Matt, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story and your background. I think for a lot of our families, kind of to your point, how a lot of our grandparents and great grandparents had served, but I think the statistic of somebody in your immediate family serving is pretty low. I think, a lot of people have to go off of is what they see on TV and movies. And so, I'm sure some people have questions about your service as much as you can share without oversharing, because I know a lot of it's secretive. But one of the things that resonated with me that I think would resonate with our students is you had mentioned that, you had served with a lot of these professional athletes and people who were always winners until they weren't. And, I think with a lot of our students, they have experienced a lot of wins. Of course, they have had their pitfalls over time. But for those who have kind of been in that winning streak and who maybe have been in a very specific bubble and have been playing against the same people for the past however many years, there is going to come a time when they're not going to be at their peak. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, my wife would joke, it sounds pretty harsh, but if you're winning all the time, you need to find bigger giants to try to slay. So the reason I said that is because there's no harm in failure. There's no, I would say, even honor in winning all the time. Yes, we kind of view these super athletes as being all-time champions, having win streaks. But what you may not see, in fact, I would argue this is true. And you guys, I've spoken to several people who've contributed to the ICL community about this. There's two ways to do it, right? You either prepare with so much effort to where when you are faced with those challenges, you have acquired the discipline and the skill sets to be successful and hopefully win, right? But the value was the process of preparing for the win. If you just continue to kind of do the same thing because it's worked for you in the past, right? Conceptually, you're actually not bringing any new tools to the problem. So when someone does come from an alternative, angle, right? If you're playing in these same communities over and over and seeing the same style of play, someone from the other side of the world is going to come up that you've never seen before. So when that happens, because I think it will happen if you continue to pursue these paths, and that's okay that it does, prepare the best you can. Put your absolute best effort into everything that you're doing, if this is the direction that you want to go. And that whatever the turnout of that competition turns out to be, you can always rely on, okay, did I do my absolute best? If I did, then that's all you have. Acquire the input and the things that actually technically, you lost because of, and take them as tools and apply them to the next one. It can be pretty earth-shattering to be successful over and over and over again and then fall short. Understand that, and I could go back to my story a little bit. There was a couple times my SEAL career was successful. I was very fortunate to just kind of move right through, and then I hit a massive wall. And it's because I kind of expected it to go the way it had always been going. And in hindsight, a couple of years ago, I would not change the circumstance of the failure. At the time, and I mean this, I could not sleep at night, right? I woke up reliving the failure. It took me a couple of months to kind of snap out of it and just move on. But I think when I say move on, it wasn't I don't want to think about this anymore. I genuinely faced the failure for exactly what it was. And what it was me failing to prepare for the event. So to answer the question, I guess, yeah, when that happens, right, just absorb it. It's okay to feel, like you may be inadequate. Understand that it's not you. It's not you as for who you are and what you bring to this earth as a human. It's just a technical skill set that you may or may not have been totally prepared for at the time. That does not mean that you cannot acquire those skill sets to then be successful in the future.
Thanks for sharing that, Matt. And, I was taking notes while you were talking. And one of the things that you said was, phase one for you was all about like that grit, right? Like just show up, and it was the physical part, probably it sounded like. And then the phase two, there was this, you said you had this opportunity to kind of, you had to step back and actually create a process, because you weren't just going to get through by trying hard during the actual moment, right? And I'm just reminded of my own journey, having been an athlete, and I was a professional dancer. And there was this moment where I decided one day at practice to pretend that it was the real thing. And my dance teacher pulled me aside afterwards and was like, "Why don't you practice like that every week?" And I said, "I don't know, because I just do that at the competition." And she was like, no, if you practice like that, then at the competition, you'll be even able to be better than that, right? And it was just this like little light switch that went on that, oh, I need to prepare differently, and so I really resonated with me in my own journey. And it sounds like it's something that, how else have you been able to kind of apply that light switch throughout your time? It sounds like that's when the light switch hit for you. But when else has that been relevant for you along your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a phrase that you may have heard, but at least in the military, we say it all the time. You will fail to the standard you prepare for. Meaning you will not rise to the occasion. If you are putting in 80% of your potential at your practice, I can guarantee you will not be achieving 100% of your potential when it comes to game time. Meaning, really what you're probably looking at is when these events happen, whatever it happens to be, tennis, water polo, skiing, whatever it is, what you can't control are the environmentals, right? You can't control the travel requirements, your sleep. I mean, you can try, right? But it's always kind of tricky. Right? The competition, the weather, all these things. So what we do in the military is we train for the worst case scenario. We train for, to be blunt about it, like everything is going wrong, like everyone's injured, we're overwhelmed, we're kind of not going to make it out of the situation alive. And the training is far worse than what can be real, right? But what we do know is that the training is kind of an accumulation of everyone's past worst lived experiences, right? Lessons are learned in blood, and these lessons are acquired by the community, and they're given back so that we can train to them. And the idea is that when you talking about the process or dancing, right? You want to be able to tell yourself when quote unquote the chips are down, and you're behind in a competition, you need to be able to tell yourself, I have been here before. And by saying that, it will lower your stress level and your anxiety of what it is that you feel overwhelmed with. And it'll allow you to kind of stay in your zone of performance and just be cognitively aware of the actions you're taking and not get overwhelmed and feel like you're drowning.
Yeah, thank you. And I know, again, Matt, because a lot of people here probably don't have the insight, maybe there's a story you'd like to share from your experience, maybe an obstacle you had to overcome, or there was a situation where you really had to persevere, and it wasn't just winning a match. It had to do with life or death, or close to it. Because I think it is important for our students and our families to understand that it isn't always just a game, and there is a lot more out there. And, because our Navy SEALs are some of our strongest leaders in our country, I would love for them to learn a leadership skill straight from somebody who's been there.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, as far as the experiences go, kind of tying back to those worst case scenarios we train to, the idea of that is that if you can expose your brain to experiences, then hopefully you don't become overwhelmed by that input when it happens. That being said, when you deploy, it is for real. And that burden becomes a lot heavier because the decisions that you make have direct ramifications, not only for your own safety, but for the safety of, in this case, the guys around you, which is a lot heavier of a burden than your own personal autonomy. I think speaking for the community, it is, I think all of us would switch places with an individual who didn't get the chance to come home, to see his kids. It's and the last thing you want is to be responsible for that happening and that preparedness. So that's when you kind of take a step back and just realize what life kind of is. Competition is a wonderful thing. I think it's the fuel that helps us to be successful later in life. But the reality is it is just a game. And some of these things that occur in the military and other avenues and other spectrums of human suffering are very real. And fortunately, growing up in the United States, in the West especially, right, we have a lot of buffer, I guess I would say, before things can get pretty ugly. And so, when you're in these environments of competitiveness, it's okay to take a wrap off. I'm someone who's pretty high strung typically, and I put a lot of pressure on myself. And one way to kind of step outside of that is to find avenues in which you can give back to other people. It just kind of helps you stop thinking about your own problems, and you realize that giving is greater than receiving. And so if for whatever reason you're coming out of a competition and you feel pretty overwhelmed by maybe defeat or even success, I would find ways to kind of give that back, whether it's to younger athletes, whether it's to community centers. It's important to kind of step back and realize that there's other things going on in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And we do have a question in the chat. Somebody wanted to know, did you read or listen to David Goggins' book? And do you enjoy him?
Yeah. David Goggins is actually one of the instructors that I had going through training in Chicago. And David Goggins is 100% who you see him to be on books and TV and podcasts. He is the same person. He's the most consistent human I think I've ever met. His energy is always at 110. And I had the chance to run with him. He was the instructor. And I just remember, fortunately, having a background in running, I was able, at least in this case, I'm sure he could have continued for hundreds of more miles than I could have. But in this one case, I was able to keep up with him. And it was like me and two other guys. And I had this, speaking of that competitive spirit, this just kind of, David Goggins, as you know, the way he speaks is intense. And he would speak to us that way while we're running with him. And I kind of use that hostility, I would say, as fuel to not let him beat me. And obviously he was leading it, so I was just kind of following him, but I just had this grit to just not, like, I'm not going to let this guy's, his words bring me down, but it kind of acted as fuel. And so he has no idea I even exist, but the story I still very much value, because after the run, right, we get back and all of his condemning words that I internalize as fuel to stay with him, he kind of gave me that's what it's all about. And so, yes, David Goggins, I do not know him personally, but I have had his sweat, fall on me from time to time. And he's an intense guy, but yeah, he's a great representation of the community. His work ethic and his intensity is on another level, but yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Speaking to, members of the community, and I think you referenced this in saying that part of the preparation that you do is you kind of take all these stories from the community, right? And they help you to prepare. So could you talk about, because I think one thing that ICL tries to do as a school is really connect our students with mentorship and guidance. And so how important has that community and that wisdom and that mentorship that you've had within, or maybe even outside the community, helped you, while you were in service, and maybe even in this transition as you've transitioned out of service life in this formal way? What kinds of mentorship and wisdom have you relied on at this stage as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. Even now, I would say I value the community more than I did when I was in. And what we mean, that my wife would agree that having a common background, it was a really beautiful thing, because you could encounter these families from, you don't know who they are, right? But the second you're in a room with them, you've just had a kind of common lived experience, right? The spouses know what it's like to be on their own for years at a time, basically, right? They know what it's like to kind of be the single parent. Because you're gone. And then obviously the guys and the camaraderie is like, we have a common background with going through buds and SQT together. And there's basically just some consistency with what the lifestyle is like. And so the community aspect is actually the hardest thing to let go of. And as far as mentorship, my platoon chief, when I was checked into SEAL Team 7, we could probably not be more different, but I view him almost as a second father figure. I love who he was and his who he kind of helped me become, and the standards he held me to. Totally different than my dad, but the mentorship and the caring that occurs in these communities, a lot of it obviously stems from the reality of what it is you're going into, and there's really no patience or room to not have a very clear understanding of who it is you're working with. And but like I said, guys will give more than the shirt off their back if need to. And so within a 2-year kind of window where you live with these guys, and it's 2 years of a very, very tight family, it's everything, is that community.
Thank you so much. You referenced something when you were talking about your college experience, and I'm thinking about our kids that are in high school and they're preparing for that next step, and you referenced that, once you had made the decision to aim towards this goal, you said, okay, in between classes, I'm going to commit to going to the gym. I'm going to get in the pool. I think oftentimes our students that are pursuing high level passions, they may be doing that already while they're in, high school, but they're doing that maybe with the more direct support of their family with them. But when they get to college, that autonomy kind of kicks in. How do you stay committed and, maybe turn down some of those social opportunities that would be fun, but you have to stay committed to your schedule? How did you find success in being able to balance that while you were in school?
Yeah. For me, I think it was the fear of failing. And right, I'm sitting here talking about accepting failure and being okay with it and then moving forward. But the idea is, right, the more than failure, I suppose, it was not being able to say I did my best. And I say this looking back on what I guess I was thinking through. And a lot of guys, some of the higher level athletes too, they end up quitting. And I think because they've kind of just naturally been on this path of training, so they just say, well, I'm fit enough to do this, but they haven't really put the mental energy into what it is they're about to encounter. And so one thing that I carry now is just continuing to stay in motion. So to answer the question, if you're still pursuing your sport at a very high level, whether it's at the Olympics or a D1 program or just professional, artist, do not lose sight of what it is, because when the opportunity comes, if it comes, when it comes, prepare for it to come. You do not want to say, I should have skipped that. I should have gone to the gym. I should have gone to the studio. I should have gone to the pool. Because I can tell you that the person who does get that opportunity did that, right? They did go to the pool. And so just doesn't mean you can't kick back, right? I'm a big advocate of work hard and then relax hard. Like, work super hard during the week. So Friday night, Saturday evening, like watch a movie, hang out, relax. It's okay to take a wrap off. But kind of make sure you've earned it first.
Yeah, awesome. So this one's not necessarily a question, it's more of a comment, but you can maybe add to it. Somebody said a lot of kids on this call will qualify for scholarships for their sports at a D1 level, but they may not realize the opportunities there are to compete for the Navy and careers and incredible life experiences that can follow. So I guess what they're getting at is, yes, there's a lot of opportunities out there, in the student's sport that they are pursuing, but I think what they're trying to say is they may not understand the opportunities in our U.S. military. So maybe you can speak a little to that.
Sure. Yeah. I would say that the avenues in the military that would probably attract the students who go to ICL are probably the special operations community, and that does not only mean Navy SEALs. Army has special operations, they have special forces, so the Green Berets, they have the Ranger Regiment, great communities, different in personality, but largely very similar, same type of person who pursues them. The Navy has the SEAL teams, they have SWCC, which is a special warfare combatant crewmen, so the guys who are probably the best boat drivers in the world. That's part of that community. The Air Force has pararescue and combat controllers. Great communities. A lot of former athletes, I think, are drawn to these just because of the competitiveness, and it's pretty challenging. And the camaraderie, right? There's the team element that I think you've all kind of moved through this life so far as a team potentially, and then you get out on your own, you go to college, and then you feel kind of aimless and you feel like you're kind of on your own. And the military is a good avenue for that. I strongly encourage the special operations community because it expects a lot out of you. Doesn't mean the rest of the military does not, but kind of one of those things like aim for the stars, because one is totally doable. Just because you have a background in athletics, it being successful does not by any means mean that you can't be successful there. It's just making sure that you've acquired the tools along the way as to why you've been successful. Don't assume your success, just know why your success has gotten you to where it has. Yeah, special operations is a good avenue to look at.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, just know the route of enlisting and not really understanding the ROTC route, and what that entails and the financial benefits from that, but also the military academies and how those differ. Because my brother, he was a college athlete, got offered many D1 scholarships, and chose to go to the Naval Academy, which, if you don't know, that's a free school for 4 years. However, you owe back your time in the Navy and serving afterward. So maybe you can speak just a little bit to the difference of, that ROTC route, enlisting route, and then the military academy and what that can mean for their future.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different avenues. There's ROTC, which is the Reserve Officer Training Corps. Guys and girls who went through it can probably speak to the history of it more, but it was essentially the idea of, as I think it was World War II, they would just prepare these officers to go to school, and then as they were needed, they would just pull them out to send them overseas. There's ROTC, there's OCS, which is Officer Candidacy School. So, right, let's just say you did your typical 4-year degree, you have a college degree, and you decided that the military is what you want to pursue, this is kind of how civilian gets into that avenue. And then the service academies, so West Point and Air Force Academy, Naval Academy. There are a couple other ones like VMI, Virginia Military Institute, I believe.
The Citadel.
Or Citadel, things like that. Like they kind of pipeline you in that direction. Speaking to parents, I guess, I think when some people hear the military, they just assume there's like a cloud of danger around it. It's not really that way. Obviously, I guess it can be, but I guess, I don't know, I say life is dangerous in anything you pursue. So don't be scared of the military. Financially, it is a great way to get college paid for, especially now with how expensive college is and student loans and things like that. I would strongly encourage, avenues along those lines. ROTC, you're basically just, very, very, not even a half part-time military, part-time student, you're majority student with like a couple military-esque things you have to do. That also being said, by the time you did your college and the time back, so I think it's probably 4 years of college, right? 4 years of service. I mean, your life's just getting started. So don't view, being like 25 and getting into the real world as being a setback. I know this because I'm having gone through the process of getting out. You'll hear people speak highly of veterans in the sense of the amount of life experience you'll acquire within the 4 years of being in the military, applying it afterwards, you'll be ahead of your peers. So don't view it as a setback. I would actually argue it's a couple steps forward.
Thanks, Matt. You referenced, tools that are important to have as you were kind of going through, your journey. And one thing that we like to focus on, we're a school community. We obviously have highly passionate students and families that we serve. We try to connect them with mentorship, which is why we're so fortunate to have people like you to join these types of opportunities for our students. Another thing we're really focused on is connecting our students to the mental preparation. It's not just the physical or the academic piece, but really that mental toughness, the mental health aspect of, preparing them for their journey. And I'm curious, I know for me anyways, when I was going through school, whether it be in my training or in an academic school environment, those kinds of conversations weren't happening. So there are things that I'm just almost so jealous and excited that our students have access to these kinds of conversations in their school environment now. But how important is really taking care of your mental health and developing that mental toughness? How important has that been on your journey? What kinds of advice would you give your younger self in helping to secure those tools?
Yeah, it's interesting going through because maybe it's just when I joined, but there's kind of a lot of the sports science was coming online and getting applied to the military when I'd started. And so we go through these classes on resiliency and breathing and stress management. And in between all of these lessons, we'd be running out, getting in the ocean, getting sandy, coming back in and doing hundreds of push-ups. So I'm sure that the lessons didn't stick the way they intended them to be, but we did get them nonetheless. As far as the mental preparation, when I said that these programs are 100% doable, I say that not knowing that I was going to be 100% successful, but looking back, I can say that I was fortunate enough to kind of stumble into a path that I think is the recipe for success. It is finding situations in which you have never been put before, and then spending time in what that feels like, and then continuing to move forward out of it. And what I mean by that is that will allow you to always look back and say, right, I've been here before. So as far as the mental toughness perspective, in kind of a sports psychology sense, if you can go back to, again, to train harder than what the actual event will be, that will allow you to kind of stay in control of that space. As far as things like anxiety, Yeah, that one's tricky. There's physiological tools out there, as far as like breathing, and kind of, stress management. How I personally mitigate anxiety, is I keep moving. And that does not mean that I want to be moving. I just refuse. I would rather, I don't know. I just keep moving. Even if if I'm used to doing 1 hour to 90 minutes to 2 hours of physical work a day, and for whatever reason, just life feels overwhelming to me, rather than say, because I can't do 90 minutes, I'm a failure, I'll take 20 minutes of constant movement. And then tomorrow that turns into 25, 30, 35. And then before you know, you're back at 90 minutes, 2 hours. It's just this ebb and flow. I would don't expect life to just be this constant. I figured out my routine. I know what makes me successful. I'm going to do this and stick to this for the rest of my life. Right. The teachers and the students and the parents here can basically guarantee the second you feel like you've dialed in what works for you, it's probably going to change, and that's okay. It's okay to not feel like you have total control of your life all the time. Find a couple of tools. For me, it's exercise. It's continuing to move forward. It's sleeping well, trying to eat well, that kind of help mitigate some of the external stresses that come in. But just understand that because you experience these things, you're not a failure. I've experienced them, the anxieties, the stress, the insecurity, the depression, all of it is, I think it's just life. And especially today, it's a thing that we talk about. Understand that it's normal, but I would encourage you to find tools that allow you to be successful through it. Like exercise and sleep. That seems to be, for me, to kind of help a lot.
Thank you so much. This has been such a great opportunity for our families, and thank you to all the families as well for, putting your interesting questions in the chat. And Megan, I see Caitlin reminding that we do have our surveys, so don't forget to fill that out. The link is in the chat, and I'm sure that within the next handful of days or so, usually within the week, we'll have a recording available. So if anyone in your family missed it, we know sometimes we get mom but not dad, or maybe some of you had to jump off early or joined us a little late. We want to make sure that you get the benefits of this entire conversation with Matt. So we'll be getting that out to everyone within the next week. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. I learned a lot, and I'm very, grateful for your time, and just want to thank you on behalf of ICL and our community. Thank you for your service, and good luck to you in this new transition as well. We're very excited to have had you, and we hope to welcome you back soon.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Absolutely. And a special thank you to your wife and your family as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
All right. And thank you to our families. We will let you know about our next champion webinar coming up. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.